What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here with a quick update on the state of the NFL. 2 preseason games this year. Apparently the NFL is just going through with 2 preseason games instead of the normal every season 4 preseason games. Just wanted to give you my quick thoughts on what that's going to mean for NFL teams in terms of scouting talent this offseason, putting together a roster and getting their players prepared for the 2020 NFL season. During the preseason, typically, I think it's kind of overblown how much teams actually put into the preseason reps. I think nowadays we do see more teams practicing versus each other during training camp. I don't think there'll be any of that as well, which I actually think is the bigger loss here than the 2 preseason games being lost. But there will still be 2 preseason games, and apparently they're going, instead of doing the last 2 or the first 2 preseason games, they're going with the second and third regularly scheduled preseason games or weeks and taking off the first week and the 4th week. So that's interesting. It gives them 1 week before typical preseason action to get up to speed in terms of reps and practice time with their roster, more so their rookies than anything else. And then at the end of preseason, there's actually an extra week to prepare for week 1, make any roster moves, trades, cuts, and just figure out their roster before the season actually begins. And I'm extremely intrigued to see how this works this offseason, to see how it goes through, and hopefully we are able to get regular season action this year. I'm just really curious to see if this actually impacts down the road the NFL and their preseason schedule. We've always heard that the NFL, they might be cutting down the preseason year after year. Everybody's been talking about it, but I actually think that I like the way it might go down this offseason. Yes, we won't have the typical games and action and reps, and it does hurt the players. But I actually think limiting the preseason games and going forward, there'll be an added week going forward in the NFL in the future. So I'm very intrigued to see if this is actually successful, and if it is, if they do permanently change that, and if this is kind of their plan this season, this offseason for the 2020 offseason. I think in terms of players that it could hurt, I think it would more hurt the players that are probably like undrafted guys, walk-ons, the players that we haven't been able to see in mini camps or rookie camp. Those guys typically shine in this area of the schedule, or previously back when in June and May, when we're seeing reports from camp of this undrafted rookie looks really good. For example, for the Patriots, like Malcolm Butler, for example, I don't think he would have made the team if it weren't for some strong mini camps, rookie camps, and then training camp. He carried that momentum. Now these guys that are undrafted or walk-ons, they won't be able to carry that momentum and the familiarity of what they had in training camp into those big games in the preseason. So they're going to have to really make the most of those 2 preseason games and then make the most of the training camp time versus the starters and in limited reps. I'm also intrigued to see how this impacts teams with new quarterbacks like Tom Brady in Tampa, Cam Newton in New England, and Nick Foles in Chicago, let's say, or Phillip Rivers in Indianapolis. Some of these guys already know the system. Some of these guys are just being signed like Cam Newton. So how does that hurt or change the way that a team, a coach would go about prepping for this offseason and putting together practice reps if that preseason time actually impacts anything? Again, I think this is kind of more of a overestimated. We're going to talk about it, hype it up a little bit too much than it actually means anything for NFL. I think what's really important is as long as they get those training camp practices down, and as long as they get to go through those reps on the practice field with some pads on versus their teammates, first team versus first team, that's all that's going to really matter at the end of the day. I don't think it's really going to impact them losing 2 preseason games. If anything, we're just going to see more entertaining preseason action with possibly some starters mixed in there in one of the games, and then in the other game, all the guys that are fighting for the extra spots on the roster for special teams, for the third strings, whatever it is, the back end of the roster. It's going to be highly competitive 2 preseason games, and actually probably more interesting, intriguing, and entertaining for us to actually watch as fans. So those are my thoughts on the preseason as we head forward with only a 2-week preseason this year. It may actually impact more than anything for us as fans, fantasy football. Like, when are we going to draft? How are we scouting our talent? Typically, we get all these reports, and a lot of it being nonsense, of the first couple of weeks of camp of this guy's getting this many carries, and this guy's catching the football out of the backfield, Sony Michel, and this guy is playing in the slot like Tariq Cohen. And we get all this stuff that really doesn't matter at the end of the day, and I almost feel like for fantasy purposes, it may be helpful, but it also will kind of soften the hype for fantasy season, because typically those things get us all jacked up and excited to draft, and we want to find the sleeper and all of that. So if you guys have any questions about the preseason and my other thoughts about it, let me know in the comment section below. At the end of the day, I think the NFL is on track to start week 1, and I'm excited for this season, and hopefully everything will be all right. A last couple of notes here. The 2 guys that it might impact the most is rookies. I'm intrigued to see how it impacts rookies come week 1, if they will be the same and have the same impact, play the same amount of snaps and importance, those rookie quarterbacks especially. And then 2, I want to see if the tackling is affected or not, because it was in 2011 when they did have that strike. So hopefully it's all good. Hopefully we're getting 100% the best quality football in September, but we won't know until we actually see it. It's Mitch of the Bottom Line View. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button and subscribe for more. Peace.